Hello and welcome to World Reframed, news and analysis from the stories powering the global south. Today we'll be looking at a major political shift in South America, academic xenophobia, why oil has always been in control of Libya, and why poisonous air in Chad is a lifeline for the Amazon rainforest. I'm Ismail in Accra, Duncan Hooper in London.
Hello Ishmael. So the story I wanted to highlight this week was the situation in Libya. Its reputation in Europe over the years has been as a terrorist nation under Colonel Gaddafi, then a civil war nation, and lately as an exporter of migrants. But really what the country should be known for is as a petrostate, because it has the largest oil reserves in Africa.
And those oil reserves have in their own way helped to define it. They allowed Gaddafi to remain in power for 4 decades by giving him the resources to reward the loyalty of those he needed and offer generous welfare benefits of free healthcare, education, and subsidies in fuel to the people of Libya.
But after his fall from power in 2011, rather than bringing the country together, oil started to pull it apart, with one faction based in Tripoli in the west and another group in Benghazi in the east, both trying to control oil revenues, and even signing exploration agreements with foreign companies and countries.
So what happens next, Duncan?
Well, to answer that question, we asked the security and intelligence consultancy Eigenrac to set out the scenarios that they could see, and they've produced a report on globalsouthworld.com. What they've said ultimately is that the status quo could break up in 2 ways. If the African Union or another party is able to find a compromise that both sides can sign up to in order to share the oil revenues equitably, that could help really bring a new unity to Libya. The other scenario is a complete breakdown of the system, where individual regions take control of the resources in their own areas, and potentially that fragments things even further. For now, the triggers for either scenario are not present, but it's definitely one to watch.
Very interesting. However, let's move to South America, where Bolivia is heading to a runoff election this October after 2 decades of leftist dominance under Evo Morales and Luis Arce. Voters are looking elsewhere, and that shift is dramatic.
Yes, Ismail. We previewed this last week when we had some interviews with the vice presidential candidates. The forerunner going into the second round now is Senator Rodrigo Paz Pereira. He took about 32% of the vote, and right behind him is Jorge Tuto Quiroga, who is a former president of the country, and he scored around 27%. Both are opposition candidates, which means that for the first time in decades, Bolivia is preparing for a government led by the right.
And this is very fascinating how Rodrigo Pereira got here. His campaign was grassroots all the way from buses, shared taxis, going town to town. And his running mate, a TikTok famous ex-policeman, Edmund Lara, that outsider energy really connected with voters. Meanwhile, the governing movement for socialism, MAS party, has been pushed to the margins. Their candidate barely scraped 3% for a party that once seemed unstoppable. That's a massive fall.
Yeah, indeed, it's a really sharp change, but it's actually also part of a broader regional trend from Argentina to El Salvador. Voters are turning away from leftist governments in the region. Whichever candidate wins, there are going to be some major economic and social changes coming down the line to get control of inflation and to bail out the economy. It's going to be painful. But Bolivians are just going to have to hope that once they get through it, they have a more stable economy where they don't have to queue for essentials or cut back their shopping each month. And it seems that they have confidence in that, and that's why they made the choice that they did in the election at the weekend. Now, from South America to Southeast Asia, in India, it's another election story. The country's election commission has issued a very stark warning to opposition leader Rahul Gandhi.
Yes, and that's basically a very hard show proof or apologize. And Rahul Gandhi accused the commission of what he called vote theft, saying the electoral commission or electoral roll was packed with fake entries and duplicate voters. The election commission shot back, demanding either a sworn affidavit with evidence or a public apology.
Yeah, they were very blunt, and the chief election commissioner said there's no third way. And that raises the stakes because Gandhi's been trying to build a narrative around what he calls vote chori or stolen votes.
And the commission says those allegations are baseless, even harmful to India's democracy. But this is also about political messaging. Whether Gandhi doubles down or backs off, it will shape how India's opposition positions itself going forward. And even more than that, this case will be closely watched in other countries too. How the participants handle the situation will definitely influence how politicians in surrounding countries and even further around the world try to push their own causes.
Yeah, certainly. And over to South Africa, where xenophobia isn't just on the streets, it's now entering universities.
That's right. I interviewed Dr. Precious Simba, a Zimbabwean lecturer at Stellenbosch University, about a new study on the marginalization of African academics in South Africa. And the findings were heartbreaking, from barriers in hiring, promotion, and research recognition. It's an extension of the wider hostility that migrants often face in that country.
And I suppose that's even slightly ironic considering South African universities have historically benefited from intellectual solidarity across the continent. They were one of the bastions in the anti apartheid movement.
Yeah, exactly. And yet, till now, institutions that should be centers of inclusion are rather mirroring the exclusion happening in society. Some academic bodies, like the WITS Center for Diversity Studies, are trying to address it, but the deeper problem of xenophobia within higher education is proving really stubborn. Let's hear a little of what Dr. Simba had to say.
For a lot of us, that's xenophobia. It's this violent, grotesque action against foreigners that happens somewhere in the townships. That happens in a place that is removed from the civility of, of a place like a university campus. And so that's why it was important for us to give it a name, academic xenophobia, because this xenophobia, it's a form of silencing, like you say. It is a form of making invisible. So the contributions of African scholars are not well acknowledged.
And you can see more of that interview on globalsouthworld.com. Now let's take a look at something from our partners at World Visualized this week. And remember, you don't need to wait for me to tell you about these stories. They are all published on Instagram at World Visualized. First up, we have a map which shows the nations with the best and the worst air quality. Now, the best air quality is pretty much exclusively small island nations, basically places you might want to go on holiday. The Bahamas, Bermuda, French Polynesia, the US Virgin Isles. It does really read like a sort of holiday brochure of beautiful island destinations, and it's easy to imagine why they don't suffer too much. The surrounding areas are almost completely clear of industry, and also they're typically wealthy and they take care about the environment in order to encourage tourism, which is much more important to them than heavy manufacturing. But the other list is more interesting because it's not primarily the most industrialized nations and not even only the most populous ones.
I see Chad on top of that list, and I wouldn't have expected that. It's certainly not an industrial powerhouse or densely populated. So what's going on there?
Yeah, this is a fascinating case. What we're looking at here is airborne particles called PM2. And these tiny things can get into your lungs and into your blood, and they cause conditions like blocked arteries and even lung cancer. And air pollution is the third biggest killer in Chad. And why is that? Well, it's partly because most people in Chad cook on open fires, which are very inefficient and they don't burn well, which means a lot of unburned material is released into the air. And poor waste management also means a lot of rubbish is just burned out in the open. But there's another factor, and that is the Bodali Depression, which is the dried up remains of an ancient lake. And when wind blows across the parched surface, the sand and the dust gets picked up and spread through the air. And in fact, it travels so far that it's really an important source of nutrients in the Amazon rainforest on the other side of the world. Locally, it's a severe health hazard, and it's known as the world's #1 source of dust.
That's an incredible feature, but tragic for all the people whose air is poisoned by it. And I guess, aside from trying to green the desert, which would be an immense project, there's not much to be done. Further down the list, I see Bangladesh and Pakistan, which makes sense given the huge population density. India's northern cities in particular are also famously polluted. Although China isn't there, presumably because of the government's drive to clean up after the scandals in the run-up to the 2008 Beijing Olympics.
Yeah, that's right. That was a really big driver. And nowadays, cars are rationed in many Chinese cities. And of course, the investments that were made back then in electrification means that a lot of traffic is now zero emission at the tailpipe.
Well, number 4 on the most polluted list is the Congo. Is that the cooking fuel issue again, Duncan?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that affects so many African countries, and it contributes towards climate change and deforestation because they're burning wood and charcoal that's come out of the forests, and perhaps most pressingly to the spread of those deadly fine particles in the air. And we discussed on Global South World a few weeks back a project to expand electricity networks on the continent, and this is why it matters so much. Let's have a quick listen.
When's the last time you went a full hour without electricity? Can't remember? Meanwhile, 600 million people in Africa don't have access to any electricity at all. That's more people than the entire populations of the US, Canada, and Brazil combined. But change is coming. Within 5 years, there's an ambitious plan to connect half of these communities to the power grid. This means investing in new power generations and expanding the networks that deliver electricity to remote areas. The project is costing hundreds of billions of dollars and is facing a major challenge. How to fund this transformation without burdening countries with crushing debt or allowing private energy companies to exploit the situation with excessive pricing. The stakes are high, but success means more than just flipping a switch. It means eliminating one of the biggest contributors to climate change in these regions, cooking meals over wood fires. Lighting up Africa isn't just about electricity. It's about taking one of the most significant steps towards making our world a better, more sustainable place for everyone.
That will make a huge difference, and not only to the millions who get electricity, but to those who breathe the air around. Now, a theme we often touch on in this podcast is democracy. But how many countries are so committed to democracy that they even put it in their name? Any ideas, Duncan?
You put me on the spot there, Ismail. I know about the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, for sure. I think in Algeria's official title, there's the word democratic in there somewhere too, but I'm not sure what it is. And then after that, I'm really struggling.
Well, that's 3 out of 8, not even 50%. Well, the others dug up for us by Javi on the World in Maps Instagram account are the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, the Federal Democratic Republic of Nepal, the Lao People's Democratic Republic, and the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste. And the full name of Algeria is the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria.
Yeah, I'll try and remember that. In the past, we did have some democratic countries in Europe as well, but they got wiped off the map a couple of decades back with the fall of communism. And sticking with the theme of national identity, I wanted to show this eye-opening video, which shows how original countries have been when they chose their flags. Thanks for being with us, and see you next week.
you.